Yeah. So, hello.
Great.
Yeah. Good evening, and thank you, Vinayaka, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Yeah,
I'm sure you must have a hectic schedule from which you took lots of time for us.
no problem.
So, bef- it'll be before I introduce start with this. This is our second last session for career counseling, and okay. This is our second last session for career counseling, and today we have Vinayak Sen with us. He's currently working in Punjab. He'll be telling us in much more detail about what he's doing, and he's working with governmental policies in a certain context. Now I hand it over to you, Vinayak.
Sure. So, a little background first. Prior to becoming a consultant or a fellow with the government of Punjab, I was a communications consultant with Election Commission of India, their voter education division. It's called the Systematic Voters Education and Electoral Participation Program. So I know quite a bit about how electoral administration takes place, as well as how government policy making gets done. So I would probably speak a little bit on elections and electoral policy making before I shift to what I am doing right now at Punjab in this small district called Sri Muktsar Sahib, which is very close to Batinda. It's almost a border district right next to the Indo-Pak border.
Oh,
Uh, so, yeah, while at sweep, essentially, I was involved in three elections: the Gujarat, Himachal Pradesh one in 2017, and the 2018 Karnataka elections. I actually went to Gujarat, stayed there in Ahmedabad, in Vadodara, and visited polling stations, evaluated what the outreach and engagement strategies were like. We essentially had three indicators, core indicators, based on which we were supposed to judge the programs. One is the quality of participation, the second is how inclusive the participation is, and the quantitative part of it, which is the voter turnout. Uh, Beyond that, there were quite a few projects centered around youth participation, which ECI labeled as young and future electors, which was a theme back in 2017. One was the National Elections Quiz, and the second one was the Electoral Literacy Project. We had a reach out of somewhere around 13.63 lakh for the National Elections Quiz. Uh, and the Electoral Literacy Project was slightly more long term. It's still going on. It includes communities, it includes school students, it includes colleges, uh, they, whichever person is about to vote within the next 3 or 5 years. They are included within the Electoral Literacy Club project. Uh, Again, I was also assigned the armed forces segment, the service voters category, and my job was to promote the electronically transmitted postal ballot system, which is essentially armed forces people and diplomats. They can be posted anywhere when the elections are on. And my job was to inculcate a habit within them that they don't miss out on their voting rights, and they get it done through this facility which has been extended by ECI. And beyond it, again, a little bit of global forum work was Voice Network. It's it's a global network of election management bodies, as well as organizations like UNDP, and ECI chairs the organization right now. I was a contributor with that network, and its job is resource, knowledge sharing, expertise sharing, best practices presentation, helping developing countries or fragile states who are not democracies yet, and like help them transition to a successful democracy by sharing the best practices which ECI has built over, I guess, 60 to 70 years, the last 60 or 70 years. That was mostly it with regard to ECI, Election
that
Commission.
that sounds quite a handful. of work and very impressive.
Yeah.
So, like, what did you do to get there? Like, that's, I'm sure that must be on everyone's mind. Like, you must have needed either a rigorous exam or a competitive scale. Like, how do you get
Mhm.
into this project? Or how did you get into this project?
Right. So before ACI, I was pursuing my post graduation at the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, New Delhi. Incidentally, that's another place where, apart from post graduation courses, you also get the Indian Information Service officers trained. So there is regular interaction with IIS officers, the cadre. We have regular engagement with the INB ministry because everything comes under that umbrella. So when ECI came for placements, came for the recruitment session, they visited Jamia Millia, they visited IIMC. These were the only two institutions they visited to get around four, two from IIMC, two from Jamia, communication consultants. And 2017 also happened to be their uh, year for youth or young and future voters, and they wanted people who belonged to that segment to come and frame policies concerning youth. So that's how it happened.
Nice. So basically, so there is no separate examinations that one has to sit to for it, right?
No, so I had to sit for a written exam, and that was followed by an interview at the ACI headquarters. That's it.
Okay. Oh, right. So,
Mhm.
okay. So, and then now what you're doing after your work with the election commission?
Right. So I joined the government of Punjab's Department of Governance Reforms. It's based in Chandigarh, and I am a fellow for district development, particularly the district of Sri Muktsar Sahib. And right now, I have been given the responsibility of assisting and being in charge of the coronavirus pandemic response here in this district. And beyond that, I am also associated with the Employment Bureau. That's like a unique initiative which the Punjab government started back in 2017. Every district has an employment bureau, and it's more relevant now after the lockdown when India has sort of been affected by the economic and the job crisis. Right now, these two are the priority areas.
So, is this particular to Punjab, or does other states have such information bureau functioning too?
I sure hope they have. Maybe in some other form, maybe it's not right at the district level or the subdivision level. Maybe it's manned from the state level, perhaps. But I sure hope they have. But this started back in 2017. They have this initiative called the Ghar Ghar Rozgar Yojana, and the employment bureaus are a part of it.
So, how did you find yourself here?
Right. So I was asked to factor in my background and also factor in my interest, which probably I would be interested in getting involved in at the district level. So I was allotted the DPRO, the District Public Relations Office, to manage, along with the Employment Bureau, and of course the coronavirus cell. So
Right.
these three were allotted to me by the deputy commissioner and the additional deputy commissioner here. I probably would be allotted some more work as time passes,
Hmm.
and a little bit of grievance redressal maybe.
Hmm.
And I guess right now that would be it, these four areas.
Okay. So, like, what I meant was from election commission to
Mhm.
this jump to this district level management of employment bureau and information bureau. Like,
Yeah.
what was the avenue that you took from? Like, what is a step if one wants to apply to this program that you're working under right now? So, because usually one perceives that to work under a government administration, you have to either pass a
Hmm.
civil service examination or a state service
Right.
examination, some sort of administrative examination. So, like, that's what I'm
Uh-huh.
asking. So, what is the process that you undertook to get here?
Actually, beyond the routine government processes of becoming a part of administration is India, there are actually quite a few fellowships, which, apart from the center, you also have the state governments carrying right now. One, perhaps the most well known, is the Haryana CMGGA program. It's the Chief Minister's Good Governance Associates program. So you have that. That has been on for the last 5 to 6 years. You have a fellowship program in Arunachal Pradesh. You have a fellowship program in Chhattisgarh. You used to have one in Maharashtra, but then after last November, December, with the change of guard in Mumbai, it has been discontinued. But I guess they will probably reshape it and relaunch it sometime in the
Right.
future. So there are quite a few fellowship programs going on, and I guess the age limit for most of them should be 29.
Okay.
So it's pretty nice opportunity
So,
for.
what is the eligibility criteria for these fellowships?
You need to have some public sector or government sector work. You absolutely need to have that. You need to have that. You need to have a post graduation in any relevant field. Maybe it may be public policy making. It may be political science. It may be communication. It may be law. These are the usually sought after degrees which your recruiters look at when they are scouting for people like us,
Right.
for consultants or fellows.
So, you have done history, right, in your
Uh-huh.
bachelor's,
Right.
and
Right.
your postgrad you did in mass communication.
Communication. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So, how does history, or if at all, does it helps you in this line of work, or does it act as an attributing factor, or
Oh, absolutely. History has a huge role. I will be asked multiple times to speak about historical context or historical background of a certain place. For example, the very place where I am now is very historically vibrant. In fact,
right?
history is probably something that defines this district. Beyond it, it doesn't have much of an identity. Maybe a little bit of politics is there because it's also the home or the bastion of the Akali Dal, the Badal
Oh,
family,
right.
right here. And historically, it's very vibrant because what gives it identity is the Battle of Muktsar, which was Guru Gobind Singh's last battle against the Mughals. And he wrote the Zafarnama to Aurangzeb right before this battle. And it's hugely, hugely relevant in popular memory here. So the first thing when I asked like the locals here, like, tell me a little bit more about Muktsar. The first thing they said was Battle of Khidrana, which was the older name of Muktsar, and the last and final battle of Guru Gobind Singh right here. So yeah, it's everywhere. It's everywhere, at least
Even in
here.
not that context, he said it's quite near to Indo-Pak border. So I'm sure even the
Yeah.
1947 memories will be quite fresh for them.
Actually, interestingly, Cyril Radcliffe planned to assign this place to Pakistan back in 1947, but it did not happen.
Oh,
So by
right.
the dint of fate, it is in India.
India, and then you're
Hmm.
there.
Right.
So, okay. So what I wanted
Hmm.
to, like what I can gather from your thing is that, in a way, it's a very significant alternative path for those who really want to work with a government sector or government
Hmm.
administration, but wants to avoid civil service or cannot pass through it. So this seems like a very viable uh, alternative path that one can take.
Right. And it's not just that. I think it also keeps you at an arm's length from the routine administrative work, the paperwork which needs to happen, so that you can concentrate on policy making and the creative aspects of it. You don't have to bother reading manuals and codes and follow orders, instructions, circulars. You don't have to do that because you get administrative support from the government machinery right here.
All right. So it leaves away the burden of all the theoretical work out of you.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, on the side note of what you just said, do you like? Oh, wait, you were talking about the historical importance of the districts that you're working in. So
Uh-huh.
technically, like, do you have the scope or the avenue, if needed, to do a research work in that place that you're doing, a historically research work? Like, you pursue two things two at the same time.
Right. Maybe in my personal capacity, I can do it, but I don't think I will get the time because I have to follow a very hectic schedule.
Right.
More so now, as long as the pandemic persists, I don't think there will be much scope for academic research here.
Okay. Okay. So that makes sense.
But yeah, it's interesting in the sense that it kind of is a hark back to the times of Mackenzie carrying out survey work in some remote Mysore, which he was a complete alien to, or maybe
Right.
James Todd being assigned in far off Rajasthan, Rajputana, to go about documenting it in his annals and antiquities. So it's something of that sort.
That's a
Maybe in my
very
personal
interesting
capacity.
parallel. That's a very
Right,
interesting
right,
parallel. So
right.
yes, another thing that I was just asked by someone, like the difference that like when we are talking about it as being an alternative path to civil service, is there any difference in the perks? If there is a difference in responsibility, we can understand, but perks.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I don't get much in terms of government perks, but
Right.
it's arranged by the government. So right now, I don't get, let's say, a government accommodation, but
Okay.
I receive the support from the district development officer. I receive the support from the deputy commissioner's office, and they have arranged a very nice place for me to stay in the main Gurudwara right here,
Oh
and
wow.
it's perfect.
Okay, so accommodations are saying that in not theoretically but technically you do get the you know benefits from the government itself. But other lucrative aspects?
Uh, like what, transportation?
No, I mean in terms of monetary aspects. How is it? Is it better? Is it equal? Is it worse? Like which? Where would you rate it?
Uh, so I get a lump sum, and it's not much more or at par with what they get
Right,
definitely,
of course.
but it's adequate enough, more than adequate, I would
Right,
say, compared to what you would get at a private sector job. It's
right,
much better as compared to what, let's say, I'm 24 right now. A 24-year-old would be getting in a private sector job right now.
okay. So, in that context, which is the highest level up to which you can be promoted or made to work if you go by such means?
Okay, so it depends largely on how the program designers shape it. If they want to change it a little bit next year, so there is probably a chance that I can continue in this district if I want. And if they change it, let's say they want me in Chandigarh. So since I have a little bit of experience at district work, they might just ask me, probably, like, you should come over to Chandigarh and work there, but it all depends on how the program gets shaped next year. It's
Right.
dependent on that. Right now, I don't think there is much scope. I have to stick to the district. There's no
Okay.
scope for me, but I will have to regularly visit Chandigarh to report on how things are, how developments have been in the last 1 year.
Is there any demerit that you might say, if or something that one should keep in mind or be aware about if someone wants to pursue this? Like some hard facts that one should remember?
You have to pick up the language. That's the most essential. I have to learn Gurmukhi here because every single circular, every single notice is in the Punjabi script. So forget English, forget Hindi. That's their main language here, which
Right.
is used, and you need to pick that up. Otherwise, there won't be many people to help you translate that each time you approach them. So
Yes,
that's
and even
that's
normal communications can't happen, right? Like the way you
uh-huh.
talk, like if it's an information bureau and you have to get in touch with the locals of the place, you need to have a sense of the language in that context.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's like it's an indistinguishable small town. It doesn't have any of the traits which metros or megacities have.
Right.
So you have to do away with that lifestyle and adapt to the changes which small town brings.
So, how is the changes of the small town bringing it to you?
One is it has terrible public transport system. It's pretty dismal here. You don't have much beyond the three wheelers. Everyone has a private mode of commute. That is slightly difficult. Uh, Beyond it, I think there are some infrastructure hassles. You need to be, I don't know, maybe you might be subjected to frequent power cuts. You have to be, uh, I don't know, poor roads. You have to expect agrarian, how do I say it? At least in Punjab, it's a pretty agrarian state. It doesn't have industries. So you have to keep that in mind with everything that it brings along, the
So
feudal
basically, be
mentality, the
ready to
feudal,
adjust.
yeah, the feudal culture,
Oh, okay, right.
the patronage system. It exists at
So,
least in
yeah.
this part of Punjab. Yeah,
So yeah. So did you plan this? Did you plan going into this stream, or did it just happen?
it actually just happened. I did not plan for it. I studied brand management. I studied crisis communication. I studied stakeholder management, social sector PR. I was reading about Burberry, Apple, Zappos models, their brand policies back in IIMC. My course was advertising and PR. Just by the stroke of luck, I landed up in the government or public sector. So I was far, far away from this area. It just happened by luck. Can't say much beyond it. I was completely not
So
prepared
what did
for
you
what
plan
happened.
like when you were doing your bachelor's in history? So what did you had in mind? Where did you see yourself what was your plan then?
I was actually, I thought I would be associated with a public affairs or a public relations firm when I was completing my post graduation back in IIMC. I had no plans for joining the development sector or the public sector. In fact, IIMC, the companies or the firms which actually visit IIMC, they are overwhelmingly corporates. You don't have much of government sector firms or institutions coming to IIMC. ECI was probably the only one in my year, and that's how it happened.
That sounds one nice story. And
Mhm.
so, what is your advice to anyone who wants to pursue this? Like, if anyone wants to go into this sector, what will be your advice?
Right. So essentially, it's three. One is you have to, if you, let's say, if you suggest an idea, if you suggest a project, it is you own it. It's yours. So you start with the project, you originate the idea. You have to shoulder everything pertaining to a large scale project. Support will come along. You have several encouraging, open to ideas, supportive senior government officials right there at the center as well as the state level. You will be getting the support, but it's absolutely your responsibility to get it going and take it to its logical conclusion. That's one. The second one is, I would say, opt for result oriented projects. Uh, Things should be measured, it should be tangibly evaluated. Like back in election commission, we had very clear uh, measuring tools like the voter turnout, or let's say a particular focus area or the segments turnout. If my project did not succeed in improving turnout in that particular category, my project would it would not have met its aims that it set out with. So that's very important. It actually boosts the credibility of your project. So it should be measured. The project should be measured, and the last one should be, I think, harmonize your interests, harmonize your hobbies along with solutions to a government challenge or a government question. It makes government work exciting, and it sort of compensates or neutralizes the prosaic parts of government work. For example, while I got to draft concept notes, I got to draft policies for elections and voter education. Parallelly, I also had to come up with tenders. I had to write and draft tenders, requests for proposal, expressions of interest. So these are the more prosaic parts of it. I was also asked to coordinate with states on disbursal of funds, funds utilization. These are the more prosaic parts of government work, but you have to sort of balance the two. So I would suggest harmonize your interests, your hobbies, your forte with the solutions to the government. My interest was quizzing, so I sort of aligned it with the solution that ACI was seeking back in 2017.
That sounds a very helpful advice. So, since we're
Mm-hmm.
coming to the close of our session, I just wanted
Right.
to ask you this one thing that I've been asking almost everyone. So, given the fact, like our theme for the entire session was to show how history is something much more than just being a teacher or a professor or researcher. So, given the
Mm-hmm.
fact that you work in a public sector, what do you
Mm-hmm.
think is the current Indian mentality of history, and what do you perceive of the subject to be?
History is perceived. How do I say it? It was extremely crucial back in ACI. With Punjab, it's everywhere. History is everywhere, so you can't discard history at all. With ACI, it was extremely important, and I remember when my interview happened, the first thing that I said was I hail from the same college as the first chief election commissioner, Mr. Shukumar Sen, and they were, I guess, pretty impressed with that.
That must be a very good starting point.
Yeah, and they actually started the first Shukumar Sen Memorial Lecture this year in January, which is ECI's foundation date, and he's considered the architect of India's electoral system. There is a lot of archival work going on in ACI. It has a very impressive library. So history is right there in ACI. History is everywhere. In Punjab, I'm absolutely sure it's there as well. I will start to explore it a little bit after some time, I guess. Once the pandemic dies down, I don't have much time with regard to exploring history here, but it can't be sidelined here in Punjab. It's engulfed in history. You can't you can't ignore it.
That's true for almost every place and every corner of the world,
Uh-huh.
being engulfed in history. So I guess this is it for today, and thank you so much for joining us, Vinayaka, and for so much of information that you gave us. It's very helpful for us.
Right.
Am I
Pleased
audible
to
or
be
am I
here.
too
Pleased to
slow?
be here. You are audible.
Okay.
Pleased to be here. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. And for those who are watching us tomorrow, we have our final session with Swati Dubey, who's pursuing MBA and is now working in as an executive sales in Naukri.com. She has done her bachelor's in history and then shifted to MBA. So that will be our final session of what are the careers that you can pursue by doing history. Thank you, Vinayaka, again, for taking our
Thank you so
time.
much. Thank you. My pleasure.
Bye.